Well, it's sort of, the way things are going is just make pretend reality, make what I want be reality. So we're going to see this. We're already seeing this thanks to the doctrine of the document of the kissing cardinal. Two men. Well, we're just going to say this is a marriage, just blessed as such. Well, we're not really doing that's what it is. And I think the next step that I predict we're going to see in a year is women dressed up in dalmatics claiming they're deacons, which, with some kind of Jesuitical distinction that they're deacons but not ordained deacons. They're
And this under the leadership of the Pope, who just said the other day that of course we can't have women deacons in the sacramental sense, so he'll just dress them up as deacons, and they'll be de facto deacons, and then the rudderless ship under this Pope will continue to run aground. And meanwhile, mysteriously enough, we have a Pope who no longer says Mass, apparently.
really, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, yeah, doesn't say Mass anymore. That's what the reports are. So, what
I
does that
mean,
what
he's
does that
kind of
symbolize? I wonder.
he's kind of busy as Pope. I can see you got to cut something out.
Well, you can go and combat global warming, but he can't offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass if he even
Yeah,
believes it's the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
yeah. Well, but I mean, the root of this essentially is the fundamental error of man-centeredness and the fundamental error of nominalism, that things are not what they are in reality, that there is not a reality. It's we just name things what they are, and we are in control of reality. And that's been that rebellion, from you say 1517. I think it goes back even before that, and then plays itself out in modern culture. We're seeing the sort of final death throes of this self-centered, man-centered, subjectivist reality, right in front of us.
Including the Pope, who doesn't say Mass. And in case people think that's an extravagant claim, Philip Lawler has just written an article on this, reporting that dozens of media outlets are reporting that Pope Francis did not deliver a homily. That's true, but what's more remarkable is that he did not celebrate the Mass. Still more remarkable, Pope Francis has not been the principal celebrant at a public Mass for several months. And Lawler goes on to say, there's no physical reason he couldn't find some way to celebrate Mass despite his disabilities. And he says, remember the last days of John Paul II, tormented and crippled by disease, still found the strength to celebrate Mass. But not this character, who is going to attend, or has he already attended? I don't know, I've lost track. The G2 summit. He can do that, but he can't celebrate Mass. Make of it what you will. Whatever you make of it, it's not good.
Well, again, if Maximilian Kolbe could find a way to offer the Holy Sacrifice in a Nazi prison camp, there's pretty much no excuse at that point.
But again, that's symbolic of the state of affairs, of the absolute collapse under this Pope of the regular order of the Church, reaching what has to be. I mean, what more can we expect? The final stage in that continuing process of decay, to quote Cardinal Ratzinger, that followed the Second Vatican Council, and which he says unjustly, but I say quite obviously, has been attributed to the Council itself and its ambiguous documents, its opening to the world, its new orientation for the Church, all of which have been catastrophic. Quite obviously, no one can really dispute it any longer.
Well, and that raises, I think, a related point. One of the errors of, I think, conservative-minded people, both in church and state, is to think, if I just throw a bone to the progressives, if we just let it go this far, we can kind of contain it. So again, within Vatican II, I think, well, if we could just have a little opening here, allow this, we'll contain it, and we can avoid a worse harm. Same thing politically. I mean, the so-called Republicans, well, if we work with the Democrats, we allow this, we'll avoid a greater danger than if we just say no. And I think that's been really a flaw the past couple decades, that ultimately never does anything. It just maybe slows the progression down a course a little bit, but ultimately the progressives get where they wanted to be in the first place.
Sure, it's like the Bolsheviks versus the Mensheviks.
Hmm.
The Bolsheviks wanted to destroy everything and murder anyone who stood in their way, and the Mensheviks said, not so fast. Slow down.
Let's take our time with this.
The problem is the enemy is absolutely inflexible in its pursuit of evil, But we are not correspondingly absolutely inflexible in the defense of the truth. And we see this in both church and state. We see this with the prelates who will not stand up to the progressives and give ground constantly, so that now we have a woman pretending to be a man who's a hermit. And then we see it in the Republican Party in the United States, which doesn't have the courage to stand up to the implacable foe, and so constantly gives ground, basically doing their will while at best attempting to slow it down, which is why, by the way, all the powers that be in the United States and even on the global scene are arrayed against a former playboy, still a billionaire named Donald J. Trump. Absolutely astonishing political phenomenon.
No, it is, and I mean that is unfolding every day. That phenomenon changing almost by the hour, but it's sort of interesting. So as you said, a playboy billionaire can attract the attention of people. Says something about the state of politics in the country, right? That sort of can appeal to so many people, to tens of millions of Americans. It sort of says a lot about the lack of professional politicians having any credibility.
Well, what we need is the equivalent of a MAGA pope who can make the church great again. It won't involve wearing any red caps, I can assure you of that, unless it's a Cardinals hat.
Well, it's funny. Back in 2016, I wrote for the, I think it was for the Remnant, a satire piece called "Donald Trump is running in the next conclave for Pope to make the church great again," and
Yeah, I remember that. I was
promise,
alluding to that, actually.
yeah, promised to build communion rails and make the Jesuits pay for it. I think.
Yeah, and then the traditional Catholics will be so tired of winning that they say we don't want to win anymore.
Right. Exactly.
But we laugh at that as well because of the absurdity of the whole situation.
Yeah.
But that's what's going to happen. There will be in the church the equivalent, but obviously a holy equivalent, not a
Yes.
secular political one,
Right.
of a pope who restores things. It's inevitable. Inevitable before the world finally is rolled up like a scroll and tossed aside, as the Old Testament says.
Hmm.
And then the new heavens and the new earth are ushered in. But we're still not there yet. We haven't seen the appearance of Antichrist. Enoch and Elias have not returned to combat the Antichrist. So we're still not in the actual last days, but we're getting ever closer.
Hmm. Well, and obviously, even before that, we haven't seen the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, the conversion of Russia, and I think it's pretty clear at this point the consecration of Russia. I mean, there was maybe some hope a couple years ago with what Francis tried, but clearly, the way things have progressed, as Father Gruner always used to say, the consecration of Russia would bring about such dramatic events that it'd be impossible to deny its power. But I don't know if you've seen anything. I haven't seen anything.